Yeah, so who bought a debate ticket tonight? Okay, there we go. We got one. What's your name? Zachary? Great. You got a pro-Trump position you'll be debating Stephen on? Okay, great. Excellent. Well, why don't we start with Zachary? Yeah, come on up. Everyone put your hands together for Zachary. He's going to be our first debater tonight. Keep it going. It takes a while to walk up here. So since you're first, you're going to be holding the microphone nice and close to the mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's up? How's it going?
So, under Trump's immigration zero tolerance policy in 2018, over 5,000 children were stripped away from their parents. And according to a Yale Human Rights report, between 2017 and 2021, more than 4,600 were stripped away, and 1,360 were never reunited with their parents. But I have a question more broadly regarding the concept of, what morally relevant distinction do you make between yourself and Trump when you can't name the trait between mother cows and calves and migrant mothers and children who are stripped away when 9.5 million are stripped away each year in the U.S. alone?
Well, I think the moral difference is there's probably different categories between like humans and animals and other humans. So you could be okay with one and not the other, and it'd be a different thing, even if you think that they should all be morally condemnable, like actions.
Wait, but that's actually that's actually naming something similar that I believe I would expect out of Trump, right? Because he would try to say that even though children and mothers are being separated from one another, there's some trait regarding them that he finds to be acceptable that everyone else doesn't see is acceptable. I mean, it just seems like if we were to go back in the 1850s and I were to ask a slave owner, hey, if your consciousness was uploaded into the experience of this black person, he would just reiterate the same sort of point that you mentioned, that there's differences between the white and the black individual, and instead of actually naming the trait or set of traits. So, I mean,
Do you think that do you think a human life and an animal life are exchangeable, like have the same moral consideration, like from one to the other?
You mean morally equal?
Yeah.
You often equate moral sufficiency and moral equality, and that brings up a really good question, because it's quite obvious, as you've said many times before, that no intelligent vegan position would actually equate the two. There would be some sort of hierarchy, like when you spoke to Cosmic Skeptic. And so I think this actually exposes my point yet further, because if about 70 million would have been stripped away between animals between that time, and there would have been about 5,000 children, I mean, that's about a difference of, 70,000 times? I mean, or 7,000 times? Is it really the case that the moral value of animals isn't even to a sufficient level of consideration, even though 70 million would have been stripped away between that time and only 5,000 for children?
I mean, I think you can have hierarchies within buckets. So, like, we could say that, we wouldn't necessarily say that, like, we put one human life would go in a different moral bucket than another human life. But, like, if we were comparing two humans, to some extent, we have to make some of these calls when it comes to, say, organ transplants, right? If you could transplant a new heart into a 90-year-old patient versus, like, a 20-year-old patient.
Where's the moral dilemma? You could value both. You could denounce both. It's not like you have to choose between the
Yeah, but we're not
animals
talking
and the
about that. So the thing that you're hitting me with is you're saying, what's the difference morally between you and Trump if you're condemning Trump for separating human babies and human adults?
The morally relevant distinction, not just the difference.
Well, sure. Well, I mean, I think it's a morally relevant distinction that that I would protect greater classes of humans than he would, even if neither of us would protect, animal life.
If you can value both, then what do you mean greater? What's the relevance of that?
Well, you're drawing a larger circle around what should be protected than what I would draw. I would draw a smaller circle, and then Trump would draw an even smaller circle still, so that would be the difference, right?
What do you mean smaller circle? The arbitrary.
As in, my circle would include immigrants, and his circle doesn't include immigrants. So mine is larger and his is smaller. But you're saying, well, why is it that if your
You mean the net amount of total beings, right?
Well, we're talking about categories of people, but sure.
Is that a yes? Because you said smaller circle.
No, net implies number. I'm talking categories of things. Like I'm talking about different categories of things.
So what do you mean by the larger and smaller circle?
the larger circle would include a greater number of categories of things that I would protect in terms of life. than
Right,
Trump's.
which effectively means the total number of beings, right?
Not necessarily, no.
So then what do you mean?
There's a difference between a category and a thing itself, right? Like a category could have a million things.
What's the
So
category
somebody
that's
could protect
encapsulate?
10 categories, and each category could have one thing, and another guy could protect one category with a million things. But yeah.
No offense, but this all sounds like jargon, right? Because if I was asking someone
Hold on,
again,
wait,
who's
wait,
a slave
wait.
owner, if I ask someone
this
who's a
is
slave
not-
owner,
hold on,
what
this
does
is
it
not-
exclude?
This is not jargon. I'm being pretty precise with my language. I'm saying that I would draw a bigger circle around the categories of things, not necessarily the individual numbers of people in those things or the individual numbers of things in those categories. I'm saying there are certain categories that I care about, like the separation of immigrant children from immigrant parents, and Trump doesn't seem to care about that. So I would have apparently I'm casting a wider net in terms of categories.
Sounds
there.
exactly what Trump would say. He would just make a point that he at least cares about a larger number of beings than some other dictator who cares about less, like Xi Jinping or Putin or, North Korean dictator.
Yeah,
Like-
but that might be true, right? I don't know if I would fight. If Trump were to say, well,
so
I'm
then
not,
it's not a morally relevant distinction then, is it?
well, the
because you
distinction we're
drew a
trying to draw
line
is
that
between me and Trump. There might be a morally relevant distinction between like Trump and Hitler. I would acknowledge that.
No. But the morally relevant distinction that I was asking you was with regards to the separation of mothers and children. And if he would effectively just say the same thing, that there's somebody out there who's worse than him, that doesn't justify the question that's being posed.
Yeah, but we're not justifying anything. You just asked for a distinction. You
A
can have
morally
distinc-
relevant distinction.
You can have a morally relevant distinction between two things, but both things are still bad. There's a difference between assaulting someone
Well,
and
then it
murdering
sounds like
someone.
you're assuming then. So do you want to ask what a morally relevant distinction would be defined as, instead of just taking it to mean something that can be posed to the agent themselves?
Well, I guess when you say morally relevant distinction, what do you mean by
The
that?
same exact way that Isaac would have posed it to you, Vegan Gaines would have posed it to you, despite you,
That's
going
not
to your
telling me
echo chamber
anything.
on
I'm
the
asking
stream.
you what do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, so I was trying to finish my sentence. So the same thing that would be meant, which is to your own view. Do you think that you avoid the logical consequences behind the thing it is that you're justifying? That would be.
How
so
can
you
I
na- you
avoid the
named trait
logical
being human.
consequences behind the thing that you have to own the consequences of the thing you're justifying? No.
But you mean like admit that you hold the position?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Of course, I would hope you're not being dishonest.
Okay. So what is the?
Well, I mean, it's your view, right? So you said the trait was being human. That was the trait that made it morally acceptable to, strip mothers and children away in one context and not the other, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
But now we're talking about like how I'm protecting things. Before, the thing that you premised this on was that Trump's distinctions were his distinction between immigrants and non-immigrants. I can't criticize that because I don't draw a distinction between
not that you
humans and
can't.
non-humans.
Not that you can't. That it would be a morally relevant distinction, and it would be very funny
When you say morally relevant, what do you mean when you say that?
So yeah, I'll say it again. That the logical consequences of the view, right, morally relevant, would be a large distinction. I'm not saying it's the case that cows don't have hooves or.
No, wait. I just define that thing.
a
I don't
cocktail.
understand what that means. Morally relevant. What do you mean a morally relevant distinction?
A morally relevant distinction would be something that makes a difference of consideration to a large enough degree that it would move you from one position versus the other.
Okay, so it has to be something that it's like a binary, or it's like a categorically different thing. So like, there's no morally relevant difference between assaulting someone and murdering someone to you. They're both just wrong, right?
Assaulting someone and murdering someone. No, there's hierarchies to these concepts, of course.
Well, okay, so then I don't understand. Then it feels like that saves my argument from your morally
No.
relevant distinction.
Having a hierarchy doesn't mean that you're not excluding beings from having protection with regards to their right to life and basic autonomy, simply because of what you just mentioned was a species, right? If my gene detector just went off and found out that Destiny is actually not the species of what you are, which is human, is it okay to kill and eat you by your own logic?
Well, I don't know. That's a whole separate argument.
You don't know?
Well, that's a
Wait,
totally
but if
separate.
hold on.
You're jumping.
But if it's your view, wait,
you're-
Dustin,
hold on,
if it's
hold
your
on.
view, if it's your view,
I'm not going to
if it's
answer
your
whatever
view-
you say because you're jumping topics completely.
What?
The initial question was whether or not I would be able to essentially to criticize Donald Trump's position if it would be hypocritical of me to do so
You
because I'm not
can
vegan.
justify it, but the question is if you can justify it to any meaningful degree to which your audience would say, oh, wow, that's something that makes a difference. When Frederick Douglass gave his speech on the 5th of July in 1852, he talked about the very core foundation of name the trait. The same underlying logic that said not what difference is there, but he essentially pointed to a trivial difference. Or Elizabeth Stanton, who asked, the same prejudice that allowed for color, allowed for sex. It's just these trivial differences. So I think that democracy was built off of the same exact question that's being posed to you, and you just keep essentially running back to these concepts that no one can really understand when they try to unravel it. I'm still having difficulty understanding it. Is the trait human that you think makes it acceptable?
It is, but that wasn't what the initial thing was. The initial thing was me and Trump can have a different position on immigrants, and I don't lose the ability to criticize
You
him
keep
for
saying
that.
different and taking out the component that I think you know matters, which is morally relevant distinction.
Sure, we can have a morally relevant distinction on how to treat immigrants, and I can
To
criticize
whom? To yourself, right?
What do you mean?
You said we can have a morally relevant distinction, right?
Yes.
From your own view, right?
Sure.
I would ask your audience if you think that you're morally distinct from Trump because you drew the line at where moral value was lost simply because of the trait species. Again, I think if you were honest about the reductive that I gave you, which falls from the view that I took my little beep detector out and it said Destiny is actually an android, that your audience would not want to kill and eat you by your own logic, but you would agree in order for, I'm sure, to maintain logical consistency that that's the case, right?
Not necessarily. That's a really complicated question.
Wait, no, but it would follow from the view. If the trait was actually genuinely what you just said, which was being human, then it would have to follow from your view. You should not know that. You should know that. This is just like when you spoke to Vegan Gains. You said you weren't sure, but you should be sure if that's your view.
Sure. So that's a totally different argument. We were focusing on the Trump thing. If you want to have like a general argument, I guess, about veganism, that we can have like the general argument about
It's
veganism.
still,
but
no. It entails the concept of name the trait, but it still
No,
reduces
name the
down
trait is
to
a
it still
singular-
reduces down to Trump
No, so
because if
name
you
the trait
think,
is a singular way by which we can try to expose a non-vegan's hypocrisy when it comes to veganism if we want.
not hypocrisy, logical inconsistency, or absurdity, and it seems like you're taking that one.
Whatever, sure,
Sure.
whatever you want to say. But the
broader question's about Trump, though.
Yeah. Even the comparisons to the slave-owning people before, I don't think were necessarily compelling. Like, even if a person, might have a bad view on slavery, we would still say there's a huge moral difference between a person's view on human life who wants to kill all humans or enslave all humans versus somebody who wants to enslave just a certain race of humans. The person who wants to enslave anyone, would you not recognize there's a difference between those two people?
Again, you keep saying
I'm gonna
difference.
ask
It's a
that
morally
over-
relevant distinction.
Is there a morally relevant distinction between those two people? Somebody who wants to enslave all people or somebody who wants to enslave just one kind of person?
Of course. If there,
Okay,
if
wait,
there was a
so
woman
if
who
they
was
can
going to be
have a
raped
morally-
and killed versus
Yeah.
just killed, I would obviously choose one evil over the other. But
Sure,
that
so
moral
then why-
dilemma
so why can't I make
doesn't
the
get
same
you out of-
distinction?
That moral dilemma doesn't get you out of the base question, which you don't have to choose either.
What do you mean you don't have to choose either?
You don't have to choose either atrocity.
Sometimes you
can
do,
denounce.
though, right? Like in an election, you have
Is
to...
that the context that's being asked of you?
Well, the context that was being
You
asked...
can't answer yes or no. I'm just going to ask, is that the context that was originally being asked of you, or did you assume that?
I don't know.
Because-
I don't know how this maps onto the concept. Originally, it seemed like the question...
Sure, so stripping mothers and children away
Yes.
for the context exactly as we do in regards to animals, which is just to eat them, or Trump actually at least has a better, on the book superficial sounding reason because he's trying to protect America, but you're actually lower than that on that tier because you're talking about the
Then
concept
don't
of just
vote
eating
for me,
animals.
I guess, if you care about veganism. I mean...
Wait, what's that?
Don't vote for me, I guess, if you care about veganism. I don't...
That sounds exactly what Trump would do. He would use humor in order to deflect instead of actually defending.
I'm
his
not
position
using
logically.
humor to deflect. I think that you can have two people that are both
You
non-vegans.
just said don't vote for you,
You
right?
can have
Was
two
that your
people
position?
that are non-vegans, and you can have like a moral distinction between the two in the
You
positions
just said
they
you're
hold.
not joking,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. What?
Well, you just said don't vote for you on veganism. I think if Trump said don't vote for me on black rights, again, you've only proven my point that you are MAGA. You're succumbing to the same exact ideology underlyingly.
Okay, do you
Guys,
think
that's
that-
not to say that he has the identical views that are held, but the underlying logic therein. And if you think that there's a morally relevant distinction, I implore you to actually think about it.
Okay.
Saying okay rhetorically and not going back to how you think you're morally distinct doesn't get you out of the point.
I've
does
already
it?
said how I'm morally distinct. You don't
You've
accept the answer
said
because
it, but
you're...
you have it. But every single time rhetorically, you've lost it because you're going up against.
No, I
someone who's
haven't lost it
philosophically
because you want to
competent.
have a further debate on like how to justify the position of veganism.
No, underlyingly, it comes back around to that. If you think that there is some sort of a distinction between humans and animals that makes it acceptable, but if your justification hinges on you being distinct from Trump because of that underlying distinction, that's not necessarily the same thing.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the broader question is still, how do you morally distinguish yourself from Trump? Underlyingly, there's a premise of that if you can't name a morally relevant distinction between humans and animals, such that one atrocity of stripping mothers and children away in one context because of speech is acceptable, then yes, you can go back to name the trait. But if you're the point is just that there's two separate questions. One's a question within a question with regards to name the trait. I just assumed, or not really assumed, but knew from what your public position was last on veganism that you said, the trait was species, so on and so forth. You had a chance to name it again, but that doesn't sound like anything else Trump would or wouldn't say. It sounds exactly like what he would say. He would try to name mothers and children are being stripped away. Well, they're just another species. Don't vote for me when it comes to, black rights or women's rights, Jew rights, any of these other rights.
Okay. I'm trying to, I think I'm understanding what you're getting at. Okay. I'm going to try to rephrase your argument and tell me if this is what you're saying, okay? All right? Okay. I think you're trying to say that I have a position on veganism versus non-veganism. And part of this ultimately would reduce down to an argument related to name the trait. And my justification for killing animals versus not killing humans would be that I would name some trait that you would say that if you would explore through argumentation, you'd find this ultimately an arbitrary distinction.
No, not that I would think, that either you from your own view or anybody else can
Sure,
judge
anybody
it.
logically sure would say this. Okay.
What's that?
Anybody logically parsing the statements or anybody?
No, there's a big distinction there because you might just say, well, that's from your own vegan perspective. But if it hinges on the core values that you already have regarding human rights and it starts from a human and says at what point is moral value lost, you don't get out of that by saying that I already value animals because it doesn't start from that. It would be true of your own view that if you said, again, I took the little beep detector and it found out that Destiny was an android, that would presumably be problematic from your own view.
I mean, maybe. I don't know how we would resolve that. I mean, we can talk about that next.
You say maybe, but is the trait
hold on. You keep trying to. I'm just trying to understand your argument. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So it sounds like you're trying to say that I'm using name the trait to draw a distinction between human and non-human, and I'm using that to justify why one is okay and one isn't okay. But that ultimately, if I were to explore that, I wouldn't be able to justify my arguments there. But that if we look at Trump, I'm trying to criticize Trump, and you're saying, well, your criticism of Trump is that he's essentially using like name the trait between immigrants and non-immigrants. Therefore, we're both powering our positions with the same type of argumentation. So how can I criticize one versus
Not the
other?
same. I don't know if same type of argumentation means the same underlying logic that attempts to make a
That's what I'm.
distinction between.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I understand your perspective when it comes to that. We would have to explore, I guess, the vegan side of the argument more. Do you think on, I guess, on a broader level, do you feel like there is a difference between those two types of people, or in your mind is every single non-vegan basically like incapable of logically criticizing like any other non-vegan's
No,
position?
that's a separate question, right? Being able to logically criticize somebody else that's worse than you is distinct from whether or not you succumb to the underlying logic of the other party in
Okay, but
question.
do you think that it might be that one party might be preferable even if they use the
No,
same
sure.
underlying
So
logic?
I can understand where, if I understand you correctly, you're trying to say, for example, can a pedophile judge Hitler? Of course they could. For example, somebody who's bad can judge somebody else who's worse, but still operate under some sort of disregard for the rights of other beings. That doesn't really get you out of the position in question. And so all I understand from you so far
Okay,
is
wait.
I'm very confused.
So then, just so we can establish, so I can criticize Trump, and I can say that one side, the Democrats, is preferable to the other side.
It was never a matter of if you could say that you could criticize
well, sure.
Trump.
Then we
It's-
should be able to
it's
say
if
yes.
you
Then I
had a
can,
morally
right? I
relevant
can, right?
It's if you had a morally relevant distinction.
Okay, but I'm just we have some shared ground. Like we can say that one side is preferable to the other, even if both are non-vegan.
We've gone through the concept of moral dilemmas, but this is a matter of moral sufficiency.
I understand that, but I'm just asking the question again. Can we say that we prefer one side over the other, even if both sides are non-vegan, because of other moral positions they might hold that might have some more relevance?
Saying that you have a preference is not the question, though, that was originally posed to you.
No, that's the question I'm asking right now.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Is this water available?
Yeah.
Oh,
Wait.
thanks.
Did you drink it?
No.
Well, I mean, someone else has been drinking it, so.
Thank you.
Okay. So. Okay. So then rephrase. Catch me up. So what is our disagreement on right now? You're saying right now that I'm not able to criticize Trump's position on immigration because we don't have a morally relevant distinction between how I justify non-veganism and how he justifies kicking
No,
illegals out
you
of the
could
country.
say that's what caused you to be logically consistent, but it seems that it would make you absurd because you said the trait was species, but then you actually contradicted because you said you're not sure. So is it the trait species that distinguishes the two?
I mean, can't there be, if we're talking about like a category of actions that somebody's taking, there's like a category of actions that would probably be unacceptable against a certain category of thing. It seems like even if me and Trump disagree on how we arrive at a certain place, like we're both using kind of like name the trait. If you're going to say I'm using name the trait, we're both using name the trait to power different types of arguments. Like I feel like your criticism here would be more on the nose if Trump was using name the trait to just like kill illegal immigrants.
No, I'm not saying that the result of the action necessarily means that it's going to be, the removal of the right to life in those situations. That's why I analogize just the stripping away from mothers and children. There's a further problem, of course, of murder and so on, but I just think it's very interesting to focus on the specific concept as it pertains to what I've seen you be passionate about several times, which was, human mothers and children be stripped away and then criticize Trump for it, but then not be able to say what the trait is. Again, you say it's species, but then you don't actually bite the bullet on that.
Well, I mean, I think I would bite the bullet on it, but we would have to explore the other hypothetical you gave more.
But when I took out the beep detector, found out that you were an android, you weren't even sure if you'd find it to be okay for you, by your own view, if you were to be killed and eaten.
Well, because I think it would significantly alter the understanding of what it means to be human, and it would probably significantly alter the understanding of what I even think of myself. Right?
Is that just to say yes, you'd be consistent on you being killed and eaten for food because we found out that you weren't human?
I don't know. We would have to explore what that
If
means.
you
when we
don't
say
know,
that we're not
Destiny,
human.
respectfully, if you don't know, then it's not your position.
No, what it means is I have to think about it a little bit more before addressing.
But then
like,
the
a
trait
hardcore
is
vegan.
not. But then the trait is not species if you're not sure about it. That's a contradiction.
I understand that you can say these words because you've ran down these arguments 50 trillion times in the
No,
vegan
no, it's
Discord
like-
server
if you
because
think
Isaac
I'm-
and Vegan
if you
Games have
think
trained you.
it's
What I'm
false-
saying
if-
is that like
if
I'm not
no,
going to sit here and
Destiny,
own.
you're trying to gain
anything.
rhetorical ground.
No,
If you
hold
think
on.
it's
I'm not
false-
gaining. Hold on. You've been screaming the entire conversation. Okay, chill. Okay.
Screaming?
All I'm saying, well, no, but you're like rattling off like all of the hardcore fucking debater vegan
Okay, well,
points
then
like
make a
crazy.
distinction there.
I don't know if I can at this point in time. I'm not
I
prepared
know
to
you
have a
can't make a
hardcore
moral
debate.
distinction with regards to the rights of life of humans and animals, so you can't make a
Well, no, I can
distinction
make the
with
moral
regards to me
distinction that I
yelling.
consider the life of humans to be life that should be protected, but I don't consider the life of animals to be protected.
That's just that's circular. So I'm wondering what the trait is.
Well, it's not circular. It's axiomatic. It's just foundational, right? I value human life. Some people value greater than human life, right? I don't know if you can justify that. I don't know
Well, if you're trying to say it's irreducible and you have some sort of virtue that says that you just care about the species in question, right? Like it could be axiomatic, but it still has to be something true of the being in question. Because otherwise, if it was the same being and you had a difference of attitude, that would be contradictory. Like, how would you distinguish if you were blindfolded whether or not you would kill one set of being versus the other? You wouldn't just say it's axiomatic. There'd have to be something that was described.
Wait,
of
I don't
the
even
trait.
understand what the purpose of that question is. That could be applied to two humans, and you might be able to not distinguish it if you're blindfolded. How does that?
With regards to whether or not you find it acceptable to take their life.
How could, if you're blindfolded, you don't even have the
You have
ability
the
to
traits
gather
described.
enough.
You have the traits described to you. So if you just said it's axiomatic, and I said that, well, I don't know which being to kill by means of your own view. What do I do? And you just say kill the one that's human. That's effectively just reducible to you saying it's because of their species. So that's going to reduce down to some thing.
Why does it
true of
have
the
to
being.
reduce down to anything?
Because if you were talking about the same object and you had a difference of attitude, then it would be a contradiction. It's like
It
saying
doesn't
I'm
have. Wait,
outside
why
the room.
can't a thing just be in the same category of objects? Like I can talk about two different humans without having to morally distinguish one category of human from another category of human.
If you were talking about the same context of the removal of rights, but you had a difference of attitude, or you claimed to have a difference of attitude, but you said that there was no morally relevant distinction between the two, that's the contradiction.
I don't understand how there could be a contradiction. I can have different human beings that are all human beings that have different categories of rights.
So say that there's two beings that are in front of you, and I ask you, which one would you find to be acceptable to kill? One's a human, one's a cow. And you just say you just value the one, not the other. It's going to beg the question of what about the being that would cause you to say that one has more value.
Sure, the fact
one
that
doesn't.
one is a human and one isn't.
So the trait is species then.
Sure, yeah.
Belonging to the hoping. You just said that it wasn't your trait, but again, if I took out the beep detector,
I never said that it wasn't. I never said that it wasn't my trait. I'm saying that I can still draw a distinction between two humans without having to say that. Without having to say that it's a contradiction because I'm recognizing there might be different rights between two different humans.
No. The concept isn't if one has more or less moral value. It's with regard to, again, the same exact context of the removal of the moral value of the beings. So it's you can. If I
Who's
understand,
removing? Trump is not removing the moral value of any beings, though. I don't understand the comparison there.
wait. He absolutely would be if he's. You just said it yourself
No,
earlier,
this is the
right?
thing I was
said,
pointing out
you
earlier. I was
Said
saying that-
undocumented. You said undocumented immigrant or people are having their rights removed, and that's not happening to people who are documented or.
Yeah, but they're not having all of their rights removed. Trump is still treating them as he would treat.
Did I analogize all the rights?
Yeah, yes, that was the distinction we were literally just talking about 2 seconds ago.
No, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I clearly said with regards to stripping away children from their mothers.
Then what is your issue with what I just said 3 seconds earlier? So then we agree then Trump is not stripping away all of their rights, correct?
I didn't just say all their rights. I said with regards to the situations of where mothers are being stripped away from their children.
Okay.
So I said 5,000 at the beginning.
Okay.
That happened
so
between
back me up. So what is our disagreement then on this?
your attempt to try to justify the distinction between yourself and Trump is apparently you're confused on if that's species or not. So I don't know how you really distinguish yourself from this guy that you're going on a whole anti-Trump
So I don't
for.
understand how I can't say that Donald Trump doles out different sets of rights to different groups of humans that I don't agree with.
No. You keep saying you don't understand how you can't say something.
I don't understand.
That's
That's
a
not a
modal
morally
term.
relevant distinction between how Trump doles out rights to somebody and how I would dole out rights to
Wait,
somebody.
what was the first part?
I don't understand how we can't. There's not a morally relevant distinction between how the two of us assigned rights to different categories of people.
Do you think there is one?
Yeah.
Is it belong to the species human?
No, I don't think. No, not
So
generally.
then what is the trait then?
But, well, it would be like immigration status or nationality or skin color sometimes.
Yeah, so if somebody looked at Destiny and looked at Trump and said that the reason why you excluded one set of beings and he excluded one set of beings was because in his sense he said nationality, the arbitrarity of the moral value in question from one set of beings versus another, I think to any other being would say if they looked at the immigrants in question and said, oh, they found out tomorrow that they weren't actually belong to the species Homo sapien because the beep detector went off or their mind was transferred into another being.
We're not talking at the level of species though.
It would be if that's your justification. You said that's the thing that distinguishes you and Trump, such that if someone were to look at Destiny, they should view you morally distinct from Trump because this is how you draw your exclusion versus how he draws his exclusion.
Yeah, but I don't understand what the problem is there.
I'm sure you wouldn't, just like how a slave owner wouldn't understand what the problem is.
But the slave owner would see the
if it's
distinction.
axiomatic and it's irreducible to just not, like Nick Fuentes, like when Vegan Gains asked you, like, you just value white people with blue eyes. I mean, yeah, you just value that. But I highly doubt that, right? Because, again, when I made it very abundantly clear and said my beep detector went off and you're an android, you then got all, oh, I don't know if I would be okay with being killed and eaten for food.
Well, no, it would probably radically redefine how I would view that category of thing, so it's hard to imagine that thing.
Then it's not the case that it causes a reduction of moral value, is it?
Well,
So then it's
nobody
not
has
the
ever
trait.
been measured with a gene detector and been found to have not had human genes. So, I mean, like, it's
Wait, what?
Nobody's been measured with a gene beep detector.
That's a
and it's been-
hypothetical denial.
No, what?
You said nobody's been measured with a gene detector, and I'm asking you if it were the case that they were.
If somebody asks me how many different, like, what different types of bathrooms should be in a theater, and I say
Okay,
male and female, and you say, so you believe that there are two genders, and I go, yes, so you would only have two bathrooms, and I go, yeah, and it's like, what if I had a gene detector or some magical thing, and now I found out that there were 10 genders, and I go, okay, well then I guess I would have 10 bathrooms, and then you go, oh, so then you wouldn't have two bathrooms.
What is it you think
Well, of
I'm
course you-
analogizing?
Well, you're saying that there's some beep detector, then I would find out that I am somehow not belonging to the species of human or whatever. That would radically probably redefine the way that I view that category, and so I would have to reconsider a lot of my, I guess, moral considerations for it.
So then you wouldn't name the trait belonging to the Homo sapien species then as
No,
the
I
reason
would
why.
because that's never been a thing that's been contradicted in the category
But you
of
can
Homo sapien
posit the
species.
thought experiment, just like how, again, if the black rights activist and I was in 1852
Just
along
because
with
I can
Frederick
posit
Douglass,
the thought experiment doesn't justify it in real life if the thing never actually comes to fruition.
those are the logical consequences of your view. If the white person's consciousness was transferred into the black person's consciousness and they were to say to me, well, that's not of the real world, this, that, or the other, and they tried to escape from it, or if the woman was to say it to the man, if the person who is exploiting Jews were to say, hey, don't put them in a concentration camp because of that, and they tried to run away from it because they said, well, it's not of the real world, guys. I know you love to posit that to your audience to reject hypotheticals
But those things
conveniently.
are, I don't reject hypotheticals.
You do. You just
Honestly,
did. You said that doesn't happen in the real world.
I'm not rejecting your hypothetical. You're rejecting my answer to the hypothetical by saying I'm avoiding the hypothetical. You're telling me
how
that
am I
if you could
rejecting?
scan a magical device on me, and it would show
See,
that
that's
I'm
the rhetoric right there. You said magical device.
this would be a magical device.
What's the
I'm
value
sorry.
of saying
I'm
those
sorry.
words?
A scientific device that measures me, something that delivers.
How about just instead of giving any cute words on the side, you actually
You literally
engage with
called it a gene beeper, didn't you? What do you mean?
Is that the point of fixation with regards to
I'm
what's
not
being asked of
fixating
you?
on it. I was trying to get to the hypothetical.
This is exactly Trump antics.
Okay.
Hey, look,
This
everybody,
is
you're gonna
vegan
talk-
server antics,
Yeah,
but
I know,
okay,
you're only
it is.
making my point.
What I'm saying is that if you could measure me and it turns out that I belong to a totally different species, then that would probably radically alter the way that I view the category of human being. And so
And
if it
the
would-
you now, but now you're equivocating off of the point in time. I'm
Hold
asking
on,
you
I'm
now.
going to finish this. When I say when that beeper were to beep me and I were to be non-human, it would radically alter the way that I would define that category and view
Am
that
I
category.
asking that
and then
version
it
of
would
you or this?
probably and then all of the morality that is entailed by my understanding of that category would also probably necessarily cascadingly change.
If I understand that correctly, you don't understand the hypothetical because I'm asking you now what your current preferences are. So if you were to look at that version of yourself, would it be okay? I'm not asking once the beep detector were to go off, would that version of you then change? You can think of it now. I can hypothesize, hey, later I'm going to go to the store and pick out cherry versus blueberry soda. Like you can just posit the hypothetical and imagine that version of yourself. But we're asking the current version of you.
Yeah, but the hypothetical to some extent is absurd because you're posing.
There we go. There's a hypothetical denial I was waiting for. So go ahead.
Okay. I would say that my feelings of the hypothetical is absurd is because you're implying some abstract thing that can emerge from something that I would say is impossible for it to emerge from. It's like a logical impossibility.
So on what modality is it impossible? You said logical, right?
Yeah, that there's no way that a human being like me can emerge from something that is not like a human understanding of our DNA or whatever.
Wait. The impossibility is logical, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm sorry. What's the claim that's specifically logically impossible?
That the abstraction of a human being emerges necessarily from the underlying genetic stuff that makes up humans, however you want to define that.
I'm trying to understand. The abstraction of a human being emerges from what?
From our DNA.
So you're just trying to say you can't imagine an alternate being that looks like you but doesn't have human species?
I'm saying that it doesn't seem to be a thing that's part of that category of human being.
Of the human, yeah. I mean, well, that's your trait, right? It's stipulated that they don't have the species human. So, but your problem was that it was a logical impossibility. That doesn't encapsulate a logical impossibility if you can imagine the being.
No, but it would radically change the way that I would view that category, and there would be a bunch of other cascading effects that would come from that.
But Destiny, that's not a logical impossibility.
No, but it would. I'm just saying that.
But you just claimed it was.
Okay.
If you want to be not like Trump, can you at least concede that?
So it's not about being like Trump. The issue is that like
wait,
because you guys.
So you can't.
So just okay. So I understand that you guys like to railroad everything down into like these like very 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 discrete like top logic ones. It's not respectfully. You're not capable of having. The reason why our earlier conversation was failing, by the way, is because you have this concept that you learned in the server called morally relevant distinction, and you cannot like fathom anything.
No,
that doesn't,
I understand
like,
it outside of the
you
server.
didn't. You couldn't understand anything. That's why I had to rephrase your argument like five
try
times.
To gain rhetorical
conversation
ground.
with each other. But so the issue is that like if somebody were to tell me, would you ever recommend drinking radioactive poison? And I say, well, no, I don't think I would ever recommend that ever. And they're like, oh, really? Well, what if radioactive poison was sometimes healthy for you? Then I say, okay, well, then I guess that I would.
I'm not changing. No, I'm not changing the context. It's held constant. So
no, nothing is constant because in my mind right now, my being cannot emerge from a non-human DNA foundation. That's impossible.
You said if it were sometimes acceptable. Was that what analogous to what I said?
What do you mean?
You said in your analogy, you said, well, what if I told you that the radioactive poison? It's unclear how any of this tracks, but if I could at least get one component that I think you're analogizing.
Wait, you can't understand you're completely and totally unable to understand my analogy. It's totally.
I'm trying to understand. You said in your analogy, if someone were to say, what if this radioactive poison were to sometimes harm you? And I'm wondering how that tracks back to what I said.
Okay, what if the radioactive poison was actually always healthy for you, was always good for you?
Okay, how is that that's an example. How does that track back to what I said? How does that plug in?
You really can't understand how it tracks back to what you said.
What specifically are you trying to analogize?
Okay, I'm going to restate my thing, and I'm going to let you figure it out, okay? I'm saying that if there is a thing, okay, there's a cup of radioactive poison, and when one of the properties of this is when you drink it, your body dissolves, okay? And I say you should never drink the radioactive poison. And if somebody says, oh, yeah, well, I, measure this thing, and actually, this radioactive poison, the stuff you call radioactive poison, this is actually okay for you to drink. So, like, now how do you feel about it? Well, my feelings about that thing would probably change radically, and all things that I define as, like, radioactive poison would change radically.
So I've heard you restate it, and since you want to play this game of natural language instead of actually spelling it out clearly for me, I'm going to give it to you. You said that there's somebody who would drink a radioactive poison posed as a hypothetical. I don't see how there's anything analogous in terms of the logical components there. And then if you're talking about what I thought you were discussing, which was proving that this was somehow a logical impossibility or something that you couldn't answer or something like that, I didn't get that either from your hypothetical.
What?
Try to gain more rhetorical ground. It's okay.
I'm not trying to gain rhetorical ground. You're the one who's using. This is the reason why nobody likes Isaac, by the way. This is why, because of the way you guys debate, right?
I can't hear you. This is the reason
the
why.
problem is that you're trying to gain rhetorical ground by smashing prop logic and pretending that you're making any kind of coherent point.
The
if the goal is to just like smash the prop logic and do it, you can do it.
Name the trait is plastered online. Why do you think?
No one is talking about name the trait right now. I know that you really are super eager to run down that
line
of thought.
No. I'm giving it as an example. You're just trying to cut me off.
What I'm saying is that there is a lot to explore. I'm not trying. You literally just told me to try to win rhetorically, so I'm going to try to win rhetorically. Okay? You're trying to ask me a hypothetical, and you're saying that I'm refusing to engage with a hypothetical because I'm telling you the hypothetical entails more than a simple yes or no. If somebody were to scan somebody and show that, hey, this thing that you have this, understanding of as being a human being can actually emerge from a totally different thing, well, then my understanding of that category and all of the things that I feel about it, moral, metaphysical, and everything else, those things would also probably radically change.
If you're saying I didn't give you enough context, then you should say
not at all what I just said.
You just said.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all.
So then what are you trying to say that's true?
Figure it out. What did I just say?
Destiny, this is condescending.
I agree.
What specifically, with regards to the hypothetical, are you posing as a problem? Because I'm
the problem is that
confused.
I don't think humans can emerge from non-human DNA. One necessarily entails the other.
Right. You said cannot. That's another modal term. Right. So do you think that's what I asked you?
No.
So then you're not tracking the hypothetical.
I am tracking the hypothetical. I'm just saying
You just said no, that's not what I asked you. And the whole audience laughed just a moment ago with regards to when you said the term condescending.
What I'm saying is
but
that if you were to show me...
You admitted you didn't track the hypothetical, so I'm going to give it back to you. I said if I took out a beep detector and found out that you were technically not human, you're telling me that you can't understand the concept behind it because of some sort of idea that the hypothetical I gave you is absurd, logically impossible. Whenever I unpacked that, you didn't have an answer.
I'm saying I understand the concept behind it. I'm just saying that thing...
That's all that's required.
Okay, I'm saying that it would radically change my concept or understanding of that particular category, but it wouldn't necessarily change the way that I engage with it. The category of human. Maybe instead then I would split it into two categories of, oh, well, I guess there's maybe subdivision human A and subdivision human B. But these would still be part of the ontological category of human, so you haven't like escaped the human problem.
The current you now is making that decision then, you're saying.
I'm saying that could be possible. I don't know what the difference would be. I guess we would have to dive more into the distinction. But if you measure something and you find out that it's actually something that you didn't think it was, then I would have to reanalyze that category. I'd have to change the way that I view it.
But I'm asking you now, so is it the trait belong to the species Homo sapien or not?
Right now it is, yes. But when I gave
all right, final thoughts, Mr. Vegan. Final thoughts.
Wait, hold on. Okay, when somebody 10,000 years ago identified something as water, okay, and they identified a thing as water, and when somebody today identifies a thing as H2O, are they identifying the exact same thing? Do they both mean the same thing? Are they both saying the same thing?
Not necessarily.
How not? What's the difference?
If someone were to, well, from your hypothetical, if someone were to describe the same concept, but someone were to understand it differently, then no.
So two people, you bring them 10,000 years ago and a modern person. Mm-hmm. One person looks at a thing and they go, oh, that's water. And the other person goes, oh, that's H2O. Okay. Are they identifying and talking about the same thing?
Of course, yeah. If they point to the same exact object and say that they described it differently, but they're talking about the same thing.
Do they have? Could they not have a different understanding of the thing? So, for instance, the guy who says something is water, maybe the other guy, and then you say, oh, well, water and H2O are the same thing, and then you identify it as H2O. Well, maybe it's not.
But it's not the same thing. This was originally about moral sufficiency, and I know that you've tried to take.
No, hold on. We're not at the moral sufficiency. I'm just saying that I'm saying that just because we've refined our understanding of water doesn't mean that all of a sudden water doesn't exist, or water is the same thing as every other thing. Much the same that if you were to put some kind of detector on me and you were to show that human beings, or what I consider to be human beings, emerge from something that's not just human DNA, therefore species doesn't matter. Well, it might be that species matters, but there's like a further delineation that I would draw. Maybe, possibly. That could be the case.
When you say matters, that's relative to something, which was originally
matters insofar as moral assignment goes.
You just said that's not what we were talking about. You said no, it's not about being moral.
Not about the water and the H2O thing.
But that is what the discussion was, though.
Yes, but if you were to put a beeper on, okay, so here's like a possibility. Let's say you put a beeper on me and you find out that like, oh, look, it's not human DNA, it's human bee DNA. Then I would go, oh, okay.
What do you mean by human bee DNA?
I don't know. Whatever the beeper measures. What would the beeper measure?
That you're not belonging to the species Homo sapien. That's
the species Homo sapien that's a category of stuff that can expand or shrink depending on how we define it, though.
Of course, but your trait that you said causes the morally relevant distinction where moral value is lost is just not belonging to the species Homo sapien.
Sure, but there could be greater subdivisions of the species Homo sapien if that's what you measure on a device.
Is that to say that if there was a non-Homo sapien belonging species that you found out you were, that you could possibly value it?
Well, it would be hard to imagine.
Is that yes?
It would be hard to imagine that.
You don't want to answer yes or no.
I mean, I guess yes, that could be the case.
So then it's not the case that necessarily belong to the species Homo sapien matters to you. You can say it's being subjectively similar. You can say it's beings that are similar. You can name whatever trait or set of traits you want, but you're invited to think about it instead of just jumping.
I'm not really
and
naming necessarily a trait. I'm naming like a category of things.
Is it a thing true of the being of one set of beings versus another set of beings?
What does it mean by a thing true of?
A characteristic, a property about them. So if I look at humans, you recognize there's a set of characteristics or things true of them, right?
Sure, although I'm not.
It's not a gotcha. You're not signing off on anything crazy.
I don't trust him. I'm not worried about signing off on gotchas.
Oh, okay.
So I think that I think that
there's a set of things true of you, Destiny.
Sure, there is a set of things that are called human beings. Yes, I think scientifically right now it's like Homo sapiens how we define that category of things.
Right. So those are all built off of characteristics.
Sure.
Okay. And so we'll re-explain this again, that the concept of animals have a set of things that are true of them as well, right?
Sure.
Okay. So that means that you do understand the concept of traits, which is just to say things true of the two sets of beings. And again, name the trait is asking where moral value is lost between the two sets of beings. So when you say that the trait is belonging to the species Homo sapien, but I were to remove that thing that's true of the being, in this case you, because of the beep detector, then it would have to follow logically. It's not trying to pull a gotcha, because I don't care about whether or not you succumb to that position. I would hope that you would actually be logically consistent and not absurd and say that you do have moral value still.
Yeah,
You're
but the
one who
problem is you're
named
trying to
said
say
that you
that the mistake you're making is you're thinking that if you can show that the underlying property that I cared about is somehow different, that would necessarily explode that underlying property, or I never cared about that underlying property at all.
Wait,
when it might be
what
the
do you mean
fact
by
that there might
explode?
be, let me explain. There might have been some old person who says, I like to drink water, and water is important to me, but sometimes the water kills them because they're drinking salt water or something else that's poisonous. And go, okay, well, actually, no. It wasn't the
changing
water.
the context
I'm not
again.
changing the context. It wasn't the water that was important to you. It was the H2O that was important. You just hadn't identified that trait yet, right? So it could be the case that you could identify me as some different species or some finer thing or whatever that I wasn't aware of before, but that wouldn't necessarily say, oh, well, now I'm going to explode my concept of what moral value gets assigned to every single species that exists.
So when name the trait is posited to you, the context is held equal of the two things. So it's, for example, in the, as you understand name the trait with regards to veganism, it's killing and eating one set of beings for food versus another. With regards to Trump, how I posed it, I said with regards to stripping away children from mothers in, of course, like an innocent context where, they want to be with each other. So when you say, what I don't understand is when you go back to the radioactive point, where I lose you is in trying to track what.
I don't even think. How do me and Trump even have a distinction on the traits? What are we even talking about there?
Wait. Can I just get?
Actually, I don't even know if that
understand what the
distinction works because me and
radioactive
Trump
point-
still identify both as like being like moral humans or whatever. We just assign like
hold on.
different.
Can I understand what you're trying to say about the radioactive point? Because I don't even think I understood what.
Is
your
this not an
point
example that comes up in the vegan server? What do you guys normally argue on?
What are you talking about?
It sounds like if you haven't heard like a particular argument before, you can't fathom it. Like you can't follow any of my
I'm asking
analogies
what
or any
your
of my like.
particular view is.
What my particular, I explained it
No,
like 20 times. I'll explain it again for you. That's okay. Yeah.
That sounds. Wait, hold on. Please don't take advantage of the natural language that I'm defaulting to because I'm just nervous on stage.
I
Destiny.
think I'm using.
That sounds like something
First
Trump would
of
do
all,
in
I
front
think
of
I'm using
reporters.
natural language most up here. Okay, you're the one that wants to keep harping back on like using the.
I'm
logic
just
or whatever.
I'm just trying to make sure I actually understand you, and it doesn't seem like you're trying to understand me or help me to understand you.
Okay.
So back to the radioactive point. Thank you. Back to the radioactive point. What were you trying to specifically make a point about insofar as this context is concerned? Because if I ask you with regards to one context that's held equal, but the traits about them change, and you mentioned radioactive content, and sometimes it hurts you, sometimes it doesn't, that doesn't sound like it tracks to what I'm, analogizing.
What I'm saying is that if I identify a human being as being this foundational trait that I think we all share, that we're all like the thing that gives us moral consideration, and then you say, well, I just measured something, and it's that human being thing that you're valuing is actually not a human being thing, it's something else, then what I would say is, well, I would probably change my definition of human being then to encompass whatever the new thing that you measured was.
So if you would change the trait from your current view, then that's not the trait. What is the trait?
It's not
then?
so much that I'm changing
Or a set of traits.
It's not necessarily that I'm changing the trait. It's that the trait was a proxy for something different. Much the same that when people in the past say
That's just meant to mean the same thing.
What?
It's reducible. So if you said
Yeah, but I don't know how reducible anything ultimately is. So the guy that says water might not think water is reducible to a molecule, but like in the future we might know the water's reducible.
Can I explain what I mean when I say reducible instead
Sure.
of it being so? Okay. So when you say you would change human because you would presumably find that hypothetical to be unpalatable to your own preferences, then what it sounds like you're saying is that you would consider Destiny 2.0 or that other version of you to still have moral value. So from your current perspective, you could just recognize that and say that it's not the trait belonging to Homo sapien and just try to think and elaborate on it like you said you would.
Well, I would have to ask like what the differences are.
What differences are of what?
If you're measuring something and you're saying that the science detector is measuring something different, the question would the next question would
Not
be,
belonging
what's the
to the
difference?
species Homo sapien
Yeah,
because
but they
the
don't.
trait
The
as I
the
asked
science
you-
detector doesn't measure that, right?
Wait, what?
The science detector doesn't measure
No,
ontological
it's
categories.
stipulated. It's stipulated in my hypothetical that it would measure that.
Well, then it feels like you're almost begging the question. Like I don't think I can.
What do you mean?
Well, it seems like
What's
you're,
circular?
the fact that you're necessarily like prohibiting me from answering the question in a way that is logically consistent because you're saying
There's a lot of weird language baked in. What do you mean by prohibiting? Because you're able to give whatever sort of answer you want.
ooga booga.
If you don't like the logical consequences of your view to justify that you would kill Destiny 2.0, all I'm going to say, Destiny, is you should really think about how that's probably because you actually are not like Trump. And I actually did have faith in you. I think you're a lot smarter than that. You don't have to be on the wrong side of history. But every day you wake up and you say, you know what, I could change my view. I could think about this further. You'd still be wealthy. You'd still be popular. You'd still have, all these things going for you. But unfortunately, you just don't want to recognize what Isaac has pinned you on, what Regan Gaines have pinned you on, and that's philosophically. That's not in terms of combat. You can have a private discussion.
Okay, I'll get right on that. Okay.
All right, I think we're going to move on now. Put your hands together. He had a really good run. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I am told our next debater